most Canadians are being pushed more and more into debt right now as they are spending more than they're earning. So we're going to get into this report that comes from the Toronto Star that's really interesting and points this out. Majority of Canadians are now spending more than they are taking in, StatCan says. So take it with a grain of salt, but if they're saying it, it's going to be a lot worse than they're talking about, right? So interesting. Canada's income inequality continues to widen, highlighting the struggle of the lowest income Canadians to make ends meet amidst a prolonged cost of living crisis. In the third quarter of 2023, the wealthiest 20% of Canadians with an average net worth of $3.3 million accounted for 67.4% of the total net wealth across the country. In comparison, the bottom 40% of Canadians had an average net worth of $67,738 and made up just 2.8% of Canada's total net worth. The poorest 20% of Canadians had a 0.2% negative share of net wealth. So think about that, guys, because when you look at those statistics like GDP per capita, when you look at even savings statistics, as we're going to get into right now, it's not even really accurate, because when you think about it and you're looking at these type of charts are not adjusted for most people. So you've got the people who earn a majority of the wealth, which are the top, 10%. They are actually accounting for a lot of these savings. So think about it. Right now, guys, we are going back to savings that we haven't seen since 2019. So people have lost their savings, essentially, even though their nominal accounts might be higher. And I would argue that that is probably BS. They're actually probably lower because, again, of that adjustment that you have to do because of things like this. So it's kind of crazy, guys. But that is a big thing that people don't understand when it comes to savings. The Bank of Canada has pointed to high amounts of savings. But again, these central planners, they don't have a clue what they're looking at. They do not live in the real world. And I think they obviously, at this point, are just looking the other way for other reasons. And it's political mostly. Canada's richest own the vast majority of the country's wealth. The share of all Canadian net household worth owned by each quintile. Wealthiest 20%, 67.39%. That's crazy. That's household net worth. They're more than 67%. Second wealthiest 20%, 20.43%. Third wealthiest 20%, 9.39%. Second poorest 20%, 2.81%. Poorest 20%, 0.02%, and that's minus. And you've got to think about it, guys. When it comes to the people coming in, a lot of them are in that poorest part of the economy, which is the worst part to be in. This is why I've said so many times that those people who are arriving in Canada right now are going straight into that depression because of the cost of living crisis that we have that's been ongoing now. And this has been ongoing for a long time. It's just reached that point now where people are at their utter limits, and it is just impossible really to go much further than this. So it's interesting. That's why we're seeing inflation, which is coming back down, and that's what really people don't understand. They think, oh, it's because they've got interest rates high, and the Bank of Canada and these central planners, they just get it. They just know what's going on, but it's not that at all. They don't have a clue. As we keep outlining, the new report comes amid sky-high inflation that has left the most vulnerable Canadians in the lurch, while rent, food, and other cost of livings have been going up. Wages for many professions have been stagnant. Yeah, I agree. I've heard from many of you guys who echo that statement right there, except for executives and top earning Canadians. And again, that is true. We just saw that with the bank bonuses that were paid out, and we're going to see that with all the other bonuses in the corrupt government institutions in Canada. We have institutional corruption. We're in that phase like Argentina. A new report from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives found that C-suite bosses saw their pay skyrocket in 2022. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, indicators of the cost of living, like the living wage, have been increasing as the minimum wage has barely kept up. And increasing the minimum wage, it's not really going to do anything, because the problem is actually just greed. It's actually just humans. We just act in cycles. And if you study history, you'll see this constantly repeated and repeated. Unfortunately, once you get into these greed cycles like we're in right now, where executives are holding most of the wealth and the gap has just widened so much, you get to societal breakdown, which Jeremy Grantham writes about in his books and he talks about actively, and I think is a big problem that people don't really understand. And it's never going to be addressed by politicians, because you have to think about what happens to all these people after they're done in politics. That's when they make the real money. As Boris Johnson said, former Prime Minister of the UK, let slip once, that you make the real money after you're done in politics. Why is that? Because of the corruption. And who is going to pay that? It's going to be the banksters and all the rest of it. So it's kind of crazy, but this chart is very interesting to look at. It displays what we just went through there, and it actually shows how the growing gap and basically how most people on the lower income are going into debt. So you can see right here, lowest income quintiles are these dark brown shaded here, and you can see that more and more these people are drawing down their savings. They're negative. This line here is basically zero, and then you've got 10,000. So you've got the people in the economy who are the highest net worth individuals. They are saving money. They are building up savings. Meanwhile, at the bottom, they are losing savings. And we know from what we just read that basically that is most people in Canada. So most people are losing money. And actually, when you think about it, it's those people at the top that are actually propping up the figures. And this is something that the central planners, the government, the Bank of Canada, they don't understand or realize. And I believe it's very, very important to understand in the economy right now. So it's kind of crazy what is going on. So it's not so crazy to see what is happening. And you basically had Globe and Mail come out with this kind of ridiculous article, in my opinion. But in recent months, there have been a considerable amount of attention given to the evidence that the standard of living in Canada is falling. The benchmark reference for this trend is the decline in after inflation income per person, real GDP per capita. This worrying development reflects still elevated inflation, weakening economic growth, and strong population gains fueled by immigration. The thing is, guys, they go on to say how this is a problem in many other countries, and basically we should just roll over and go back to sleep because of that. And that is that. And yes, it is a problem in many Western countries, if not all Western countries. It's a problem because you've seen this massive divide essentially that has happened between people who have assets and those who don't have assets, and those who have the assets are basically lining their pockets off the back of those who don't have the assets. Obviously that works for so long until people start realizing what's happening, or their standard of living starts going into more rapid decline, that they demand that more attention is given. But usually, unfortunately, that turns towards socialism. And the thing is, right now in politics, we have people that really are not going to do much. They're pretty much same. They're different facades, they're different flavors, and a lot of people put a lot on these politicians and say, oh yeah, this one's going to clean up Canada and whatever. But the thing is, they're not going to do that, because the problem isn't with them, it's the institutional breakdown behind them. I mean, it was somebody actually who reached out to me from Argentina, and we had a chat on the phone, and he was explaining to me how things broke down there, and how essentially the politicians are really just a facade, and the government is kind of like its own thing in itself. It's its own entity. So you can have these politicians that change on the front of it, the facade that you and I see, but what happens inside of government? Does everybody change? No, it all stays the same. And that's what a lot of people don't really understand, and I didn't even understand, and I thought that's a really different way of looking at it, because that is totally true. With the government, you see the facade change, but does really the internals change that much in the government? And government is becoming such a large thing. We've got so many institutions in Canada, like Argentina, that we are having these massive amounts of corruption, these people who are getting massive paychecks off the expense of our tax dollars, which we're coerced into paying. Nobody wants to pay these taxes. And we're constantly said, oh, now you have to cough up more for a carbon tax and for all the rest of it. You're not going to get change until you really break apart the government. And to get to that point, unfortunately, it's going to be when people realize and put two and two together and say, hold on, the reason why inflation is so high, the reason why my standard of living is going down is because of the government, is because of these politicians. And until people realize that, there's really no help in saving them. And that's why I'm here doing this, trying to educate people in the best way that I possibly can. Many of you might think I'm just on here spreading doom and gloom or whatever, but the reality is that's not the case at all. I'm trying to be part of the solution in educating people to understand so we can actually move forward and change these things, because it's not just a problem with Canada, and we shouldn't just roll over like this article says and go, oh yeah, you know what, it's happening everywhere, so who cares? And you know who says that? The government says that. Chrystia Freeland constantly says, well, inflation's high in the United States, inflation's high in Europe, and actually when you compare it, it's not that bad. So I guess we should just accept that. You know, it's absolutely crazy. You think about how they do things in tandem, like what happened in 2020. It's impossible to say that we have any type of democracy when you have governments moving in lockstep like they were in 2020. I mean, I just don't get it, how people are so asleep to believe we have anything but a globalist type government that is ruling in Europe, Canada, the United States, and all the rest. So extortions targeting South Asian home builders in Edmonton orchestrated from India, police say. So somebody sent me this article and I just found it absolutely mind-boggling, because you know, now you're starting to see crimes that are coming over. You're starting to see crimes coming over from many of the places that Canada has took immigrants from. And you're going to continue to see that increase, because the reality is, like I said, most of the people who are coming here, they're going straight into that depression. And really, guys, when you look at some of how bad some of the things are that are happening, it's undeniable. So dozens of international students are dying in Canada. The federal government isn't doing anything. Thanks again, Charlotte, for sending me this. But you know what? If you read through this, I'll link it in the description. It's basically just saying how funeral homes have noticed more and more international students are dying, many of overdoses, things like that, because we have a drug crisis that is going on in Canada. And then just to end it, I want to show you the difference between 2019 and 2024 grocery prices, because this really shows just how inflated things have got. So basically, these are all offers, and you've got some Philadelphia spread here, 2 for $5. Well, in 2024, it's $5.49 each. So pretty much more than double. And that's from 2019 to 2024. And then the same with this ham here. You've got it $8 in 2019 and now $15 each on offer. Wow, what a bargain. And then the same with this cola here. You've got it $6.47 back in 2019, now $13. You want some all-dress ruffles? We all love those. They're 2 for $6 in 2019 and now they're $4.49 each, or $4 if you buy two, which is just crazy. And then you've got more cola here. So you got 2 for $4 back in 2019 of the 2-liter bottles. And then guess what? 2024, $3.50, nearly double for one. So absolutely crazy. And then 2019 sugar, you've got 2 for $4 and now it's $3.29 each. So, you know, these prices, they really affect the poorest people in the economy, and that's what people need to understand. And the poorest people in the economy are a lot of these people who are coming over. So it's just easy and logical to think that you're going to see crime that is absolutely going to skyrocket in the coming years in Canada, because more and more people falling on hard times, that means crime goes up. And you're already seeing crime absolutely skyrocket in places like Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, these big immigrant hubs. I would avoid them at all costs if you are looking for a place to live. Anyway, I want to thank you so much for watching this video. If you're looking for a VPN, check out expressvpn.com/Market Mania to get around Trudeau's censorship laws in Canada. And if you're looking for a video that is similar to this video right now, then check out that video there. If you're looking for a playlist where you can binge watch some videos, maybe check out this playlist here. I will see you in the next video, guys. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.